All right, we're ready to play with some data. It says here, when you're given models, we want to be able to see the actual useful part of it on the calculator, so we need to set the window. Zoom 6, Zoom Standard is a good thing to know. It always resets you to go from -10 to 10, but that's not what we want in an application. So here's our first application. In 1985, 285 cell phone subscribers in Little Centerville. The number of subscribers increased by 75% per year after 85. So 85 is going to be our starting year. Our growth formula that has some initial value, and then we add our rate and raise it to the number of years, this one, we're going to enter into y equals with 285. Why? Because that's how many cell phone users we had to start. 1 plus 0.75. Why? Because that's this expressed as a decimal. And for years, that's our variable. So in your y equals, we're going to put that equation in. And I have the x in the exponent. Now what I'm thinking about here is finding a window setting to show the subscribers from 85 to 2000. That's going to be a 15-year time span. So typically when you set your windows, for most applications, a good starting point is to zero your minimums. That kind of puts you in the first quadrant. To get a maximum, since they want us to show these 15 years, I'm going to set that as 15. To get the y max, you have to think a little. And my suggestion is to go to the table and try to figure out, well, what is this function going to equal in 15 years? And so table is up here by your graph key. So second graph gets you to table. And if I look at the 15 years, you're going to see some scientific notation. So think about what this E is. That capital E is times 10 to the 6th. It's also written out longer down here. So 1.260, 1.2 million, you might want to exceed that a little. I'm going to go ahead and make the choice in my window to go to 1.3 million, just so I make sure I see that. So in my window setting, I had to use my table to come up with a judgment. But by having the equation in y equals, by having my table set, I'm going to hit graph, and I'm going to see what's happening over time in this little town. I'm going to start off around 200, look how small it's growing, and then all of a sudden, boom, everyone has a cell phone in Centerville. They're going to ask us a question about it. Now, here's what I would do. I would always label what you see. This is, this is my 15 years. So I have years on one axis, and I'm trying to write in my subscribers here, not very well. So this is my subscribers on the vertical. And it starts down here at 285, goes up to 1.3 million. Now they ask a question here. They say, hey, how many subscribers were there in 94? And if 1985 is your starting year, that would mean that this is year 9. Super easy place to get this information is just to go to your table. It has all those values in it. And in your table, if you look at year 9, it tells you there are 43872, that number right there. Those are people. So that's your final answer down here, 43,872 subscribers. So we've used a couple things here, and I want to go over them. In general, this is going to be all your screenshots. We had to enter an equation into y equals. By looking at the table, we came up with values that would help us to come up with a window setting. In the window, we saw this as our picture, and then we used that information. And we chose, again, year 9 in the table, this guy right here, because 1994 is 9 years after 1985. There's problem 1. Okay, in problem 2 here, we're setting up a tennis tournament at a club, and in the tournament it says play starts with 128 people, and during each round, half of the players are eliminated. So how does this feel exponential? Because a half is 0.5, so we're going to play with that. And we're going to use the decay idea with the minus sign, and we're going to enter the idea that we're going to start with 128 players, and we're going to subtract half of them every time, and we're looking at how many rounds we're going for. The window setting here, again, we usually like to start with our zeros here, so I'm going to throw my zeros in for my x and y minimums. My x maximums, I don't really know, but I need to figure out how many rounds we're going to go through. And you can play with this. For now, I'm just going to leave it at 10. My y maximum, though, this is your number of players, so I'm going to set that 128. It could be 130, it could exceed it a little. So what I have is players compared to what round we are in the tournament. And so if I take a look at this in the calculator, I have in my y equals menu, I have the 128 minus 1 minus a half raised to the x. In my window setting, I have 10 and 128. and I kind of want to see what's happening here. I start off with 128 players, and eventually I'm down to how many in the last round? Just 2. So a couple things to think about. In your table again, if you look at your values for each round, the first round, after the first round, you're down to 64 players. After the second round, you're down to 32, and so on. So when I take a look at my, again, starting at 128, my finals are going to be round 6. So I just had to make sure that this number was bigger than 6. Again, think about what's happening here. It's a tennis tournament, 2 people playing the finals. So it says how many rounds until the finals? That answer is going to be 6 rounds. And then if I'm answering this question, how many players remain after 5 rounds, I'm going to look at the row 5 in the table, and I'm going to see that there are 4 players in that round. So 4 players here. Always remind yourself that the goal in your window is to be able to see this graph. So the graph starts with 128 players and goes down from there, kind of in that angle down to round 6, where you're down to 2 players. Good luck. All right, the next thing we want to look at is how to make a scatter plot, all those dots of data on our graphing calculator. We're going to go into a stat edit menu that's going to look like this, and the capital L stand for list 1 and list 2. We're then going to have to find stat plot, which is up by y equals. We're going to have to actually turn it on. And then knowing this window is very helpful. Zoom 9 or zoom stat will set the window for whatever data you have. So in the very first example, if I take, undo. If I take a look at what I have an example where this is my data. So the first thing we want to do is we want to enter that into the calculator. So here's how you get there. If you're on your home screen, find your stat key at the top, stat, and the first thing that's going to come up is edit. Stat edit is a place where you enter the values. It is important when you enter to make sure you have the same number in the left and the right column, or it gives you an error message. The next thing you do is you have to turn your stat plot on. Stat plot is up here. If you're in your y equals and you see it highlighted, that means it is on already. If it's not, you go to stat plot and you make sure you highlight the on. So the on should be highlighted. Then zoom 9, it's near the bottom, is zoom stat. And what it will do is it will set the window for whatever data you have in there. It'll change it problem by problem. When you graph now, here's your scatter plot. And we're not looking for anything fancy in the notes, but that's roughly our scatter plot that we see on the calculator. So this is what we're trying to do. Now when you have multiple scatter plots, so here you are with a second problem and you have to get them in. If you go to your calculator and you go to stat edit, you're going to have data in there. Again, the fast way to clear it is to go up to the L1 or L2 hitting, find clear, enter, and it'll wipe out everything at once. So go up to the list heading, hit clear, enter, and everything goes away at once. So here are some bigger numbers: 72, 77, 73, 69, 75, 71. And if you ever make an error, you can delete and insert here just like you can on any other place on your home screen. I have big numbers in the hundreds here. Obviously, it's going to require a very different window than the last problem. And when I look at the end, always take a visual look that you have the same number of items in each column. Your stat plot is already on. If it's not, highlight it. But here's the key. New data, very different from problem 1. You have to go back to zoom stat. That's zoom 9. And when you hit enter on that one, you have your new scatter plot. So I have a scatter plot with these dots here that I got off the calculator by going to stat edit. I put the information into 2 lists. I turn my stat plot on. I make sure the word on is highlighted. I go to zoom 9 and I make sure that I set the window for this set of data, and then I can see my picture. All right, good luck with those.